Nicholas Sparks is a best-selling novelist known for romantic dramas like The Notebook, which was made into a movie. And M. Night Shyamalan is known for supernatural thrillers. He's most famous for movies like The Sixth Sense. So you might not think these two creators, storytellers from different genres would be collaborating, but they are collaborating on their latest project, which will be both a book and a movie. The book is out right now. It's called Remain, written by Nicholas Sparks, and M. Night Shyamalan wrote the script in a movie that will be out next year in October. Nicholas Sparks, M. Night Shyamalan, thank you so much for joining us here at the New York Bureau.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us, definitely.
So, Nicholas, your book is out today, Remain, M. Night Shyamalan also on here. So when I saw this collaboration, the first thing I thought was, what?
Yeah.
And I kind of want to know how it was born. And maybe we start with you, Nicholas.
Yeah, it was it's kind of born one of those Hollywood stories. You know, my agent in Los Angeles knew someone at Blinding Edge Pictures, and they get together, and there was a suggestion that Knight and I meet, maybe we'll collaborate on something. And I've heard these things before about working with lots of different people. 99% of them don't pan out for one reason or other. This one did. And yeah, I heard, I think in March of 2023 that we'd be getting together for a meeting. And I said, and the goal for that meeting was the same for both of us, right? We're each going to come up with an original story that would work as a novel and a film for my readers and Knight's fans of his films. And so we met in May. We pitched each other our little tagline stories. We decided to do his. And we spent about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half, hammering out the elements of Remain. You know, who the main character is. What does he do for a living? Where is he exactly? What does he encounter? What does the story evolve into? And the main theme of the novel, which is how true love, sometimes the only thing that can save us all.
I love that. I think some people might think it's an unlikely pairing. I mean, you're known for romantic dramas, telling romantic, dramatic stories. You're known for supernatural thrillers and these plot twists. Is it as unlikely as people think?
No, not at all. And perhaps the kind of derivative nature of defining people maybe makes it so when you go into the grocery store and go, isn't it in that aisle and not in that aisle? But for me, all my movies are family dramas with the clothing of a ride. So where I'm coming from is very similar to where he's coming from. And when I started out in filmmaking, the first screenplay that Hollywood ever kind of read of mine was a romance. And when I was 25, they asked me to adapt The Notebook. So that was the first.
So this partnership might have happened over 20 years ago.
Yeah, it might have. And it was funny. When I think of Knight's work, sure, you remember the twists and everything. But what I remember are really well-developed characters. And I remember character journeys, right? I mean, if you look at The Sixth Sense, everyone says, oh, look at the twist, let's say.
Yeah.
But how about let's look at, the character that Bruce Willis played. Look at his journey throughout the film, right? It's a journey of figuring out who you really are. And really, so if you look, we've both been into characters. We've both been into trying to craft real people. We both like to keep pages turning or keep viewers in the seats. We like to have a surprise at the end, right? You never know. As much as people think they can predict my novels, they can't. I've been known to bump people off at the end of my novels. I've kept them together.
We both love killing protagonists.
Sure, so there's more similarities, and I think I view Knight primarily as a storyteller in film, right? You're a storyteller in film, and let's tell a great story with great characters.
I think one of the things that makes me sad when I meet people on the street is if someone says to me, oh, my daughter loves you, my husband loves you, or this. I don't watch scary movies, so that's why I haven't. And that always makes me say, gosh, you really bought into the derivative nature of what you think my name is. And I always say to this person, whoever this is, I was like, I promise you will find something other than the Tabasco sauce that you're worried about. And that's why when you think of it as a cooking analogy, the genre or even very scary things is like putting Tabasco in, and I get that. It can overwhelm the dish entirely, and then you can ignore all the other ingredients and say, well, I don't like Tabasco, and I get that. But I really try to balance it. So to answer your question. I think, much closer than you would think.
Yeah. I mean, is that part of the draw of this partnership, is the bending of this narrative around what both of you do, or because you've been doing it for so long. You've written, this is going to be your 26th book. You've done so many films.
26?
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
This is my 17th
Right.
movie.
So
You have a
I'm
lot of work
pumped.
to do.
I think
I
for
know. I
catch
can't keep up.
I think for me it was neither of us needed to collaborate with anyone.
Yeah.
And that's the key. And so how do you keep this fun and interesting, and what can we do to be fun?
Yeah.
And I thought it would be interesting. And I came at it also a little bit of a fan perspective. It'll be really interesting to see how Knight, who's a genius at what he does, film. There's only a few writer, producer, directors who've been around for 3 decades. I mean, there's not that many in the world. So how does he do that? I had I had a front row view of the whole process, and that was very fun for me to watch how he does what he does. And it was really great in the process of being able to talk back and forth.
I would say, to answer your question, it was probably an intellectual conceit at first of, whoa, this could be great for our audiences to help redefine it in an interesting way. Because sometimes, like any relationship that's gone on this long, you can get taken for granted, and the urgency can go away, the spark of excitement. And so the idea of, oh wait, well, this feels a little bit, it's the dish that I love, but it's slightly different, and I know what they're adding, so there's a clear thing, and it's accurate when you see our names, the story that we ultimately did and the movie that we made. It is accurate to both of us.
I think so. I don't think there's any question about it. It's right there on the cover of the book. I don't know if it'll be on the movie poster, but it's a supernatural love story.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. And I'm not telling you which one of us contributed which part of the supernatural.
And then ultimately the process of making it, which was a pleasant surprise, was I really enjoyed having a brother to call and then say, oh, I'm thinking about doing this with the character, and what do you think about this? And the two forms are different, so he can do things I cannot do, and I can do things he can't do with an image. So I don't have to say something. I can show it, whereas he can do things I can't do, like tell you what the character's thinking. I can't do that.
So wait, okay, before we get into how you wrote the book and also how you made the movie, which is coming out next year, or are making the movie, I don't want to give away any spoilers, so I'm going to let you do the quick synopsis of what this supernatural story,
Be real
love
careful.
story is
Oh,
about.
sure.
Because I'm scared to give something away.
Right. It's a story about an architect named Tate. He's had some, he's grieving. He lost someone very dear to him at the early film. And his friend he's got a great friend who's very successful and who's worried about him, I suppose you'd say. And he says, hey, look, you're an architect. Let's get you come with me, we'll have you design our house, right? Mm-hmm. So he goes to this town and begins to work with his friend on this house. And the place he's staying, we'll say that things begin to happen that he doesn't expect. And from there, the story moves in a very Nicholas Sparks and M. Night Shyamalan way.
It's so funny because it's a very unusual thing that we did, that we came up with the story and then he wrote a different story than I wrote for the movie.
So you both walked away with this sort of tagline of what the story
No,
would
more
be.
than a tagline.
Okay.
The structure of the whole thing, like from beginning to end. However, what he just said, some of that's not in what I wrote.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we did different backstories and stuff. So what he just said about the friend who was worried about him, in my movie they didn't know each other, and he hired him to do his house. So the very different backstory. So whatever drew us was different. We said these are the characters, and then he had a different backstory than I did. So really interesting exercise.
Yeah, it was fun. I think I read Knight's script. I said, Knight, this is great. This is going to be an unbelievable movie. It works on every level. So it will not work as a novel. The structure won't work. I need to do different things. This just isn't going to work as a novel. And it was funny. He read the novel once it was done. He goes, this is a great novel. Love the novel. He goes, it is different than what I did. If you think of it, this is if the idea was a coin,
Yeah.
He stamped one side, I stamped the other.
I mean, my analogy is identical twins, and he raised one completely different than I raised another. So they don't, you can tell they're identical, but they're very different.
In their personalities.
Personalities, completely different in their, which is so interesting, right? Because it's not, no one adapted anything, and no one novelized the movie. So it's just two artists taking the same idea.
Same story, and here you go. Here's one medium. Here's how you tell it in a film medium.
Yeah.
That was Night. And here's how I would tell it as a novel.
So in the novel, what type of sort of techniques did you employ to tell this sort of new romantic story?
Well, the difference with the film is, as Knight said, right, I can hop inside a character's head. I have a lot more room for backstory. I can answer the questions, well, why?
Yeah.
You know, and I can really answer questions, why is this happening now? What was the result of this? You know, I can really get in. I can explore certain characters at a deeper level than, because of film, you just couldn't do. And it's just a different medium. You know, writing a novel is different. I do both. I write screenplays. I write novels. They're just, one is a story told in words and one is a story told in pictures. And some things work great in film. Anything with heavy emotion, he can do more in 2 seconds with Jake and Phoebe simply looking at each other.
Jake Gyllenhaal
Jake Gyllenhaal
who are
and Phoebe.
the stars of
Right,
the film.
they're the star. In 2 seconds, man, that might, for me to get to the beginning of that 2 seconds, might take a page. And then that 2 seconds, you know, might be a paragraph. And then the remnants of that might be another page. But all he needs is 2 seconds. So some things work and some things don't. They're just different.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you say it like that, because when I have my words in my scene, let's say Jake and Phoebe are doing a scene, and then I'm directing them about how I want them to be, and take 4, they do it in this certain way, and the urgency came out this way, and then if they're doing their jobs properly, they're really listening to each other, and so take 4 has a color and a movement to it that's very different than take 7. Mm-hmm. And so if they were each take 4 and take 7 were a novel, it would be described differently. I felt this about her. She did this and I did that, right? It would be a different novel from take 4 to take 7. Those pages would be different. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, it was, and that made it fun and interesting, I think, for both of us, right? I mean, I think Knight has described a film as like a haiku version of a story. Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's the juxtaposition of things. The art form of film is juxtaposition. So it's unlike a novel. So if I take and Eisenstein is the kind of like the teacher of this. And if you take a man who is staring, a picture of a man staring, then you put a picture of food that's hot, then you feel he's hungry, because I just put those two images together. If I take that same image of the man and then I put a naked woman, you feel he's lusting. Mm-hmm. And so it's the juxtaposition of these things. So it's a very fascinating psychological art form, as opposed to what you are, it's locked in stone, the way the character is feeling, whereas I'm using you as a filmmaker to finish the art form going, you think he's lusting, right? And then I'm going to assume you think he's lusting to go to the next thing. Yeah. But sometimes I want you to think he's lusting, but you're not getting it, and I don't know why. Well, because we cut out a second too long where an emotion came out right before it. Now he's feeling guilty, right? You know, because he sees a naked woman and he's feeling guilty about something. You're interpreting that and going, wow. So it's a very, very different art forms to master.
Yeah, very different. I walked away. I was on set a couple of times and I watched Night work, and I'm telling you, what I said to pretty much everyone, that what was it like? I said, man, I could never. I don't. He knows so much about filmmaking. He knows rules that subconsciously that he's probably got 100 rules of things that are just floating around his head that he knows simply because he's done this for 30 years. I walked away saying, wow, I just could not do. I've been asked, hey, do you want to try the director route? I'm glad I've always said no, because I mean, it looks really hard when, but then he might say the same about me. You know, I look at a paragraph and I'll tell you whether it's right or wrong, and for exactly what it's supposed to be doing. And people say, how do you know that? And I'm like, well, you just do. And it's all these subconscious rules just of 30 years working and
Right.
doing all sorts of different things.
So were you involved in each other's writing at all? Or did you do it completely?
It was more like colleagues calling each other and saying,
Yeah.
what do you think about this? And I'd say, oh, that sounds good. Or he would say, I had this thing, I'm going to do this, this change. And we were, the only thing we were probably navigating is we didn't want it to deviate so much
That
that,
was, like,
yeah,
unrecognizable.
unrecognizable from each other. So we were careful that they still stayed.
It's still the same story, right? And it was nice. I mean, Knight doesn't often like people to see his scripts when he's working, and I don't necessarily like people to hear about my novel while in progress. So that was fun, right? To have
Was that
someone.
hard?
No,
Okay.
because
Because
We
I always
trusted
feel
each
like,
other,
please don't
yeah.
look yet.
No, but he was super. You know what? It could. I would say 9 times out of 10 it would have been a problem. But
Yeah.
Nicholas was very gracious to be basically a hype man. You know,
This is great.
This is great. And honestly, and I always say this to people, that's our job, really. And when I'm a producer or something, is to support. And I know it sounds kind of.
you're not looking for
sentimental.
yes men.
Yes, it's support kind of. I trust that you will, you know, so as, like, for example, as a producer, when I'm trying to help like, say, a younger filmmaker do something, I say, what is it you want the scene to be? Tell me what you, and they'll say, well, I want her to, you know, have this conviction and then decide not to do this. And, you know, and I go, that's amazing. I'm not feeling that yet, but I love that.
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, I know how to make that stronger. As opposed to me going, hey, this is what you should do. Then you steal their thing. And Nicholas was great that way to support.
Yeah, I've been around enough films, right? I've had enough films adapted. I've been around long enough to know that in the end, it's going to be the director's film, right? I mean, you work with a studio or this, that. In the end, the director's impact on a film
Yeah.
cannot be understated. It's not the script. It's not the studio execs. It's the director. So in the end, it was going to be what Knight wanted it to be. And so the question, so I'm there to, hey, what do you think? Should this or this or this? And you're like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? But when you're talking about support, you can't fall into that trap of, well, he didn't take my idea. Who cares? It's going to be his anyway. It's just he wants to help learn, I trusted him that he was going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
So you want to brainstorm? Sure, we'll brainstorm, right? Okay, and that's great. And I knew he'd get there. And sometimes talking through things helps.
Yeah, it's fascinating because on that spectrum of what he's talking about, that the director is kind of the main person, I'm probably at a far end of it in the sense of how controlling I am about every single detail about it. I draw every single shot. We take months and months and months. That's what we're shooting. That's the lens. This is the movement. Don't move the camera until this moment. With the actors, that's where you're standing. This is how we're doing it. And in there's infinite ways to do it, but still, I'm curating it to an extreme level. So this juxtaposition of that, it was kind of fathered together is. Mm-hmm. I think really healthy for someone like me, so I don't go off the deep end.
I do want to ask, because you know the cliche where a film is adapted from a movie and a lot of people walk out, the book was better. You know, you're always comparing. So,
and I don't think that's necessarily the case. Jaws is an example of a film that
sometimes
was as
the film
good
is better,
as,
or this
as,
film is
you know, Jurassic
every
Park.
time,
exactly.
Jurassic Park. You know, there's
Yeah.
another example. You could say the Exorcist, right?
But you have this idea of like the book has already made it into people's hands. Your book is making it into our hands now,
Yeah.
and the film will be out next year. But you guys did this together versus adapting it once it's already been created. So what is that the future? You know, when you think about collaborations between authors and filmmakers, because you do see a lot of control
I can't
as an
imagine
author.
this ever happening again.
No, it
this
is
is a
tough.
once in a.
Well, because it's so you would need exactly this type of
Relationship.
Yeah.
for it to work. I just can't see it happening
Yeah,
again.
I've struggled with various directors. You know, my vision was different, and they're just not getting it, and you can grow frustrated. With this, there wasn't any of that, because I trusted him on the film and he trusted me on the novel for this same story.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I don't know, even maybe if we met at different times in our lives to try to do this, it might have been different.
In the sense that you're
maybe
both.
we wouldn't have been as confident or as open, or it required us being titillated by the exercise, not being afraid of it,
Yeah.
and knowing that it was going
And
to be
not-
only
and-
additive.
and not having to be well, and then to just, okay, you go do the film and trust, and he said the same, you go do the novel and I trust.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, and also if you think about it, it's not like we're struggling to make a living.
No.
So that we're like, hey, let's try something. This is a desperate move. He writes number one books. I write number one movies. We're so lucky to have our audiences, but this was an effort to, from my point of view, to be better for them and be
Right.
alive and very, very excited and try stuff that's
Give them
new.
something new
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
give them something they don't necessarily expect.
But what initially drew you to this kind of storytelling about love, about mortality, you know?
Well, it was interesting. I wrote my first novel was very genre, it was a horror novel. My second one was
your
a straight,
first novel was a horror
unpublished,
novel?
unpublished. And the second one I wrote, unpublished as well, that was a murder mystery, just a straight murder mystery set back in time, I think in the 1940s. So I had those, and then as I'm debating on what to write for a novel, I was about 27 or something like that. Kathy, I was married to Kathy at the time. Her grandparents had this great story, right? She's got dementia and she doesn't always remember who he is, and he's telling her their story every day. And I said, that's really very touching and that's very moving. That became The Notebook. Okay, so I write The Notebook. This is one. I'm like, well, come on, there's a little bit of practicality here. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, If this is what people like, hey, let's do a love story. So my challenge was then to not do the same thing I just did with The Notebook, but to, okay, let's also write a love story, but let's make it different. So the second one was inspired by my dad. It was love after loss. How does one navigate that process? And so my third one was about first love, and that was kind of modeled after my sister. So early on, I drew from family stories. And since then, I've just continued that, hey, let's look at love in a new way. This one has a lot of mystery. It's a little bit of whodunit. It's got a lot of action, right? It's love and mystery, or love and danger, or love and the supernatural, however you want to describe it. But there's another element to the love story. So it's still a love story, like The Notebook, but it's
But not
nothing
like
like
The
but it's
Notebook.
nothing like The Notebook. You see
Yeah.
what I mean? So it's just, but how do I keep doing what I do to make it different? And I think that's what Knight does, right? You watch A Sixth Sense, and he had the choice after The Sixth Sense, and I'm speaking for you. Gosh, I could do another story where there's a ghost, but a different. He didn't, right? He did The Village, or he did Signs, or he did other, he got into comic books. How do I do what I do, but make it new and interesting for the readers or the viewers?
I'm still sour because somebody ruined The Sixth Sense for me. So I went in being like, maybe it's not this person. But it was still good, even though I knew it was good.
Well, that's not a good person. That was a lot of the fun about that
Not
film.
everybody's a good person,
Right.
But with you, Knight, I want to ask about why you were drawn to the supernatural, the things that we can't see. And that's such a theme in so many of your films.
There's such an interesting parallel to the story you just told when I'm thinking about myself, because first movie I did was a drama. The second movie was, it had a little supernatural, so there's there, but it was more like a comedy, like a kid's comedy. And then I wrote Stuart Little, and then I wrote a romance, which is what then led me to them saying, why don't you write Notebook? And then I wrote Sixth Sense. And then that went, and then, so then everyone was like, well, you're this guy. But I was like, well, the same year I wrote Stuart Little. Why am I not that guy? And I even did a rewrite on She's All That romantic kids movie, and a teenage movie. So it's like, so it was before. It's funny how they say this is who you are, and then I did Unbreakable right after. It was almost the same year as Sixth Sense. So for me, I was trying different things. I love genre. For me, it's a way, I think, I probably resented this, so I'm probably at ease now with this answer that I wasn't for a long time. But I think it's looked down on genre, and so I've now really love it that's
you think the supernatural, the
genre,
thriller,
yeah, it's looked down on.
Okay.
So and it's just the way it goes, and something about, hey, nothing going on here, nothing to look at here, don't applaud over here, it's been a beautiful thing for me now that I'm 30 years in. That, hey, I'm just the guy over there, and then my peers who are doing more respectable genres are seen in a certain way. I kind of love it. Kind of like nothing to see over here. We're just making genre. So
I see
and then
you
I
nodding.
I can do it and for me, I can then approach it for me at the highest level of execution, so that the performances, the cinematography, everything is at, I'm like, so that somebody will look at me and go, wait a minute, that's not just a scary movie, and I'm like, oh no, nothing to see over here. I kind of love that now, whereas I think for a while it frustrated me that it wasn't seen as the value of it wasn't given the same as others.
Yeah. I see you nodding.
Yeah, sure. I feel the same way. Love stories and literature. Come on, and then you can turn around and say, yeah, but some of the great, you look at the horror genre, right? You got Frankenstein,
Yeah.
right? How many other books from 1800 do you read, right? I mean, but that is still widely read, or Bram Stoker's Dracula, right? Look, genre things are looked down on, and when it comes to, let's say, winning the Pulitzer Prize or winning the Nobel Prize or getting a MacArthur grant, yeah, I'll never get any of those things, and I'm okay with that. There was probably a time in my life, sure, where I'm like, wait a minute, hey, what I'm doing is not just this, right? Mm-hmm. There's more to this, and some people, I think the readers who enjoy my work get that, and I'm okay with them.
I think for me, I can't speak for you, Nicholas. You jump in on this, but I'm so blessed that the thing that the first date that I had with the audience, the Sixth Sense, mm-hmm. was something that came wholesale from me. It was just something that I just made up because there is truth in who I am in that, and so the seeds of that are in everything, and all the movies all are related. You can feel it when you watch all of the movies. So I don't have to pretend to be somebody else, as opposed to, let's say, I became famous for Nicholas's book that I adapted, and then I did it. Let's pretend I wrote and directed The Notebook. There's a part of me that's not me, that's Nicholas, and they would want me to do that over and over and over. Now I'm pretending. And so that would have been a scary 30 years, but our relationship began with honesty.
Yeah.
And so.
Because you both are creators in your own right.
Yeah.
And storytellers in your own right.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you were, wanting the readers and the viewers next year to walk away with one thing from this collaboration, what would it be?
Great story. Enjoy it. Tell other people about it. Buy a book. Go see the film in theaters. That's it. In the end, that's really what I try for. I want you to enjoy the book to the point you tell someone else about it.
I'm going to do a little bit more philosophical thing because I'm almost done the first cut of the movie. So the book comes out today, but this is probably the only time ever that the movie's been shot already. So it's finished, it's shot, I'm editing, I'm going to go home right now, right after we finish. I'm going to go back to the editing room and finish the last, so I would say what has been a joy, Nicholas, is that to have a storyteller who has honed their craft for your whole life the way you have, and has taught me different muscles. So, and those muscles, I've taken whatever small percentage of those, and they've become my muscles now, and hopefully I will remember them for the future. And hopefully the readers and the audience will feel, whoa, there's another set of muscles that have grown in storytelling. He thinks deeply about backstory in a way that's natural to his craft, and then I think in movement or structure in a way that's natural to my craft, and putting them together is really powerful.
I want to say so much more about what happens in the story, but I can't. That's novelist Nicholas Sparks and filmmaker M. Night Shyamalan. Sparks' novel, Remain, is out now, and the film will be out next October. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
for having us.
A wonderful conversation.
Thank you.